Okay, welcome to third day of the tutorial and the second code makeover here. This is how to submit grid jobs with POMS. And Ken Herner is going to guide you through this supported way of doing this. The floor is yours, Ken. You can start.
All right, so I should be doing submit with POMS. Share the screen here. Like that.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of a zoom would help. Yeah, great, excellent.
Okay, so yesterday we talked quite a bit about job submission. We had a quiz question on project.py, which a lot of people are still using for submitting jobs. And again, to reiterate, that is not supported software. Use at your own risk. It may be fine for you, but if anything goes bad, you will not receive support through the official channels. You will have to go talk to the developers. On the other hand, POMS, or Production Operation Management Service, which I left my coffee cup upstairs. I would show you the logo, but that is supported. And it's good because not only can you run DUNE jobs and Larsoft and even non-Larsoft stuff, it is common across multiple experiments and is completely, configurable as far as what you want to do. You aren't locked into any specific workflow style, so to speak. It also has really nice integration with the monitoring systems we mentioned yesterday as well. It's got campaign management options. You can chain together multi-stage workflows, much as you do with project.py. It will take care of automatically creating data sets for you for between the stages. So if you want to use the outputs of stage N as the inputs to stage N+1, that's all managed for you, as well as you can set up recovery options for automatically resubmitting failed jobs and whatnot. All right. So I think a useful thing is to just kind of get into it and try some things. Now, what the examples are going to do is basically run the same stuff as we did yesterday, where we're just going to run a couple of events on one example is a prod 2 and there's a prod 4 a RICO file. We're just going to run something on it for like a couple of events, just to make sure that it actually works, right? Running analysis on a RICO file, I think. So first thing we should do, so if you follow the first link there, this will bring you to the POMS analysis page. Now, as I mentioned, this originally started out as a service primarily aimed at experiment production teams. So that's where the production comes from, but it is open to analyzers now. So if you've got a FrameLab account, then you are automatically in here. So you don't have to do anything really special per se. So what you see here, let me zoom in a little bit, maybe, yeah. Okay, so you get your own page here, right? And the core unit here, I guess, is a so-called campaign, which consists of one or more campaign stages, each of which does some part of your workflow. So in the example that we've got here, there's only one, just to keep it simple for testing, but you can have arbitrarily many. You could do, if you're doing simulation, for example, you could run the generator plus the JON in one stage. You could run the dead sim in a separate stage. You could run the reconstruction in yet another stage, anything after that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you wanted to just chain the executables together in a single job, you could do that too. Just depends on what the right thing is for your workflow, right? For most of the DUNE production stuff right now, we chain everything together in one job because the memory requirements aren't that different between the stages. So, once you've got the slot, you might as well use it, and then it saves additional IO between having each stage as a separate job, right? Because then you have to copy the outputs back and you have to copy them into the next stage job, which may or may not be the same place. Probably won't be the same place, right? So let's get back here, and we'll go to my campaign page here. Notice there's different views options here. You have active and inactive, where active just means you've submitted, I think, in some time frame. So I have a May 2021 tutorial and I have a May 21 tutorial with Sam. So if I just click on this campaign, then if my campaign had multiple stages, notice now instead of campaign, it's campaign stages up here. They would all show up here. I only have one stage. So I click on this stage, and now I see the information for this stage. Okay, fine. As you'll see, my memory and CPU efficiency are quite low because this is a really short job, right? So immediately, though, you will get statistics for the last 30 days, how you have done as far as success rates, failure rates, if you canceled jobs, etc. The active job stats, there is a delay here, typically on the order of 5 minutes between what's really happening and when POMS queries. Could be less, but if you see that this is not exactly what JobSub is telling you, it's not necessarily any cause for concern. And then the efficiency of the jobs that have been launched in this campaign. Again, I think that's just over the last 30 days. All right, and then, as I mentioned, right, you get all this nice monitoring stuff that's just automatically linked for you here. So I could, for example, go to campaign stage stats, and then I could go here, we go into FIFMON, and this will show me all of my jobs in the last whatever time range I choose, right? Show you your memory usage, your actual runtime. Did your jobs go held? Did you have non-zero exit codes? If so, what were they? And record of submissions. There you go. And then each campaign stage will have its own page, so you don't have to go to all of your jobs and then look through and try to decipher what's what, right? Okay, so coming back here then. So here's the action section. So this is where you would launch. Please note, however, that you almost always want to use launch campaign stage jobs now. Launch campaign stage test jobs is if you wanted to have a separate set of override parameters, we'll get to that in a second, for tests, you can do that. But POMS has no concept of, okay, this job is a test job and this one isn't, right? The only difference here is just that you can have separate lists of parameters you want to override in your config file. So almost always you're going to want to just do the normal launch. You can also remember yesterday we went through and we held and removed our test jobs. You can do this very easily here at the campaign level. If you want to kill all jobs in this current campaign or hold all jobs, you just click the button. It will confirm that you are sure. And the other very nice thing you can do here is imagine you had a lot of submissions that you needed to do. So I need to submit to, I don't know, say 100 different clusters, each of which has, 100 or however many jobs in it. What you can do is set up a cron style schedule for just automatically going through this, right? Like I said, it's cron type style. If you're used to that from Linux, you can tell it, okay, I want to submit jobs, maybe every, I don't know, 15 minutes. So I could do something like this every hour, every day of the week until I get through whatever my list is. Okay. So just to give you a feel for what's possible, that also makes life much easier than having to sit there and hit send 100 times, right? Okay. So the heart of this is the config file, all right? And then you can also, if you want, override various values in your config file with custom parameters that you specify here. The idea being you can use a single config file as a template if you want for many different types of jobs. And then if you have a campaign that is different only in input data set, or maybe this one needs a little bit more memory, or something like that, or maybe you use a different FICO file, whatever the case may be, you can use the same config file and then just tweak the parameters here as needed. So experiment is DUNE right now. We can have an input data set if we want. Data sets do not necessarily have to be SAM data sets. You can also have a list of inputs. And again, these lists don't have to be SAM data sets. They can just be alphanumeric strings. And every time you submit, you can loop over this stuff. I can show you some examples of that in the production space, which is probably easier when we get a little bit more into this. I'll just show you some of the stuff we have set up for production so you can see how it's used in actuality. But okay, so let's start now and go back to the config file. So you can see actually what goes into this, right? So coming back to the instruction page again, the one we're going to start with is this guy, POMS demo.config. Then I'm going to find here we go. Oh, I need to share the whole desktop.
You stop
Share.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. How's that now?
It's perhaps a tiny bit small. So
yeah. Let me minimize these other windows. So it's because that transparency, it can get confusing about what you're actually looking at, right? So, okay. Is this okay for people to read, or would a white background be better? And then dark letters.
Perhaps not transparent. This.
Wait, how do I turn that off?
You could just remove the thing behind it. You got a web browser behind it.
Yeah.
You can read your web browser.
But changing profile would do. You can have something written on the.
There's opacity setting in the terminal setup.
Is there? Yeah, I assume there is.
Yeah. But you may have to start a new terminal to get the setting.
Yeah, maybe that's just easier. Actually. Yeah, okay.
We can read.
No, work. Here we go. Okay. So each config file has various sections. As you see, this is basically just an any style config. So there's nothing too new or scary here. Everything needs a global section. Now you can put here any variables that you want. And then you'll see I have a lot of them that say override me here. And then on the web page we just saw, you can tell it, okay, when I hit submit, override whatever the default value is in here with what I put on the web page. You can do this in the command line too if you want, with the -O option. But okay, I've got a group experiment. Then there's a wrapper script that runs, which is basically always fife wrap in the fife utils product. And then the other stuff, I'm just saying, okay, I will tell you what that is in the web page. There's also a section here if you want to have certain environment variables set in the job for you. You can do that here. So I think you don't actually have to set all of these. I think the SAM ones might be set for you, but I think it's always good to just set them anyway. Now you'll notice here, I remember we mentioned yesterday, or maybe it was a Wednesday, about if you try to copy in a non-existent file, or you try to overwrite an existing file and you have an IFDH copy error, by default, it will retry many, many times. And then you're just sitting there doing nothing, right? So here I have told it retry a maximum number of 2 times. So that way, okay, even if it fails later, the job won't time out on me, right? I'll always get the logs back and know what happened. Here are also some helpful settings for expertise streaming within the jobs. We recommend everybody set these as well. Then there's a submit section. Basically what this is what options would you be passing to job submit? So you'll recognize these from our tests before, right? Again, I have a fairly low default memory in here, but that can be overridden as well. And actually, anything in here can be overridden on the web page, not just the stuff that says override me. And here you'll notice the append convert requirements where we're checking for singularity in the CVMFS repositories and stuff. We went over that yesterday. So I just put this here in the config once, then I've got it. I don't have to type it out every time. Only kind of gotcha here to be careful of is due to the way the config file gets parsed, and there's multiple shell levels in Python and all this stuff. You'll notice that we have to escape the special characters with backslashes. So the ampersands, right? We have to put backslashes in front of them, the parentheses, that sort of thing, right? But again, this is a case of once you have to do that, you just put it in the config and then you don't have to worry about it. But just something to be aware of. Same thing here with the singularity image part, because where we give the -- lines option, we have a bowl that just popped up for me. All right. Okay, so
Sorry,
you'll see here the extra
the
slashes.
first one. Sorry for this.
Yeah.
Nothing related to this.
Okay, right. So you'll notice I've got 3 backslashes here, and the reason for that is because I need to pass a backslash to the option, because we need to keep this, the CVMFS path has to be in quotes when Condor gets it. So we have to pass this extra backslash in front. So with a backslash is put in a literal backslash, and then the backslash quote is put in the quote figure. Okay, now for the tar file name, you'll see here this %parentheses S construction. So this is doing variable substitution. So you'll notice I've defined tar name and tar dir up here, right? So once a variable is defined, then you do this percent parentheses variable name, then S on the end because it's a string. Then you do need the S on the end. So then that will substitute in the value of the variable inside the parentheses, okay? So that's a very handy feature as well. Okay, coming down then to the job setup section. So this is the stuff that you want your script to do before your main executable starts. So that might be things like setting up software, copying in files, that sort of thing. Or making symlinks, as we'll see in this case, right? So I think the setup, this is just to find the UPS setup stuff. Now, in this case, we're doing the setup May21 tutorial grid script, which is included in our input tarball. This is the same thing that we ran yesterday, okay? That's why it's done this way. Multi-file here is set to false because I'm not doing the multiple files. There's a couple of ways to do if you have an input data set and you're expected to read multiple files within each job. You can do the multi-file way, which will run your executable, run any postscripts, and then go on to the next file and do the same thing. Or you can do the IFDIH art way, which is you're letting art handle the inputs. So that's doing all your input files in one pass to executable. For most analysis-based stuff, this is probably what you want. You probably want IFDIH art. But we'll get to that in the second example. Okay, then prescripts. Here, this can be any bash commands that you want, actually. So first thing I do is I cd here. I'm already here, but okay, fine. So that doesn't really do anything. Then the second prescript I do is I create a symlink to this particular fickle file that I want to run, which I know is in the input tar directory. So a fickle file is again a variable which I have defined up there and probably overridden on the command line. Then I list link it so I have a copy in the current directory. This I don't actually use, but I just give you an example. So you can, for example, run commands like, with the $ parentheses expression, just like you would in bash any other time, right? And actually, this is wrong. I have too many parentheses, don't I? There we go. So again, we don't actually use that. But then the other thing you could do, there's this export section. So you can then set environment variables that are then available subsequently in the job. But the difference between the env pass section we just saw is those are set outside and are available at the beginning of the job. These variables are not set until you're actually running. Okay, if we were running a SAM consumer, we could set, maximum number of files per job. We could tell it what schema we want. Root's the default now. We could set other options to the consumer if we wanted to. What's the version of the application, for example. In the executable section, this is where the main stuff happens. You can have multiple executables as well. So you can do executable, executable 1, executable 2, etc. I'll show you an example of that later. But you need a name and then a number of arguments after, which I forget how many you can have. I think it's like 99, maybe. But should be enough for most things anyways. Okay, so our name in this case, right, is Laura. And then these are just, again, the same options we were running before. We're only going to run 2 events just to make the job finish faster. Now I am specifically here passing in the extra tier URI of this file. Normally you won't want to do this, right? Especially if you have SAM input, then you just don't have this last argument and you just let the IFDHart handle that for you. But just for this example, I'm including it. Also now, if I end up running at a remote site where the input file exists, but if I'm hard coding this path to Fermilab, I'm perhaps not being as efficient as I could be. Whereas if I let Sam do it, it will, if I'm running at a site where reading from their storage element is set up and the file is there, then we can read from the closer copy, which should reduce our network leads. Okay, then after the executable part runs, you could up here in the job setup section, you could add postscripts. So if you wanted to have any other bash commands that run, maybe you need to run a metadata extractor or something like that, you would do that up here in the postscript section. Or you want to do any file renaming, whatever the case is, right? Those would go into the postscripts. And then finally, you have the job output section, and you can also have multiple job output sections. If you had different types of files you wanted to copy, for example, and have them go to different directories, you could do something like that. Here, though, of course, we just have one. So there's just some rule about what kind of files should be picked up by this rule. So you have this tutorial hist, because we're making that up here, right? Notice here, again, I should mention that I'm renaming the file according to the clustering process environment variables as we had before, right? But again, because I don't want these variables to be evaluated until we're actually in the job, right? Because we don't know what cluster and process are going to be while we're submitting yet, right? We don't know till the end of the submission. I put the backslash here, right, to escape that, so that when this script is running on the worker node, then these get lopped off, and then will be the proper environment variable. Exception to that is here when we use this file timestamp, right, that we made up here in the script with this export function. Because of the way the parsing happens in the different shell levels, I won't get too much in that, but short answer is, if you're using a variable that you make up here, if you make an export like this, you need 7 backslashes. And this is all explained on the manual page as well. But again, something you just put in the config file once and then don't have to keep typing it. But coming back then to the output section, then you say, okay, where do you want to copy this back to? So I have some outdir variable defined elsewhere. You can say, okay, do you want to declare SAM metadata for this file or not? If so, what should I run as the metadata extractor? If you can then tell it run this program to extract the metadata. Or if you just use this JSON tag, what that will do is it will look for a JSON file that is named, output file name, whatever, .json. So then it's on you, though, to make that file. So what I would normally do is run my metadata extractor as a postscript and then make that file be called, the output of that would be called tutorial hist cluster process time, blah, 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 dot root, dot JSON, right? And then the output would automatically pick that up for me. And then add location is, do you want to declare this output location as a file location in SAM? If you're copying back to scratch, you probably don't want to do that. Okay, I will pause here for questions.
Yes, thank you. And I
There's
will
some.
actually, there aren't any on the
Okay.
live docs, but I will share again in the chat the
No, this is
live doc links.
Oh,
That,
Here we go.
and feel free to ask questions. But that was very interesting so far.
Okay, so just coming back here for a second. So just note the links here. I highly encourage you to have a look at them. But I think the best thing then, if there are no questions, why don't we actually submit some? So coming back over here, then finally to the May 21 tutorial campaign we looked at before. This is basically, it's going to use that config we were just looking at. Now, what you'll see here, right, is we specify the config file we want to use is this guy. And then we have a few overrides, right? We're telling it, grab the tar file from this directory. Here's the name of it. The fickle file I want to run is called myanna.fickle. And then the output directory, I'm just going to write to that same directory we were writing to before. And then the software version, again, I'm doing this variable substitution name. You'll see up here, you can specify a software version. Typically, I just use the DUNE TPC version for that, but you could use something else if you wanted to. Okay, so before you submit the first time, though, if I had never submitted anything before and I hit the launch button right now, it would fail. And I will tell you why. What is actually happening is if we wanted to edit these options here, okay, I click the edit button, then I can change the stage name, software version, all this different stuff. Specify my data set. I mentioned, right, you can have lists and all these different things. Parameter overrides go in here. You can add, delete, do whatever you need to do. We can get to completion type and stuff later, maybe. But each one of these stages also has a so-called login setup section and a so-called job type. So what actually happens when you hit launch is the POMS system will log in somewhere as you and run these setup commands. And then it will run this generic type, this job type, which is just, it will run the command fife launch, which then takes all the arguments that we just saw in the overrides, okay? So your question might then be, okay, well, how can it log in as me? And this is exactly the reason that it would fail. It needs some proxy from you for this to work. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, you'll see this user data section. And then you choose uploaded files. And what do we see here? We see I have a proxy with DUNE VO analysis role, my username. Now I uploaded that a couple days ago. I think I got 120-hour proxy, so it should be good for another 2 days or so. But tell you what we'll do, just so you can see how this would work. I'm going to delete this. Maybe. Oh, you have to check the box. Sorry. Then you delete it. There we go. Okay. So now let's go back to my campaign stage. And let's try to submit. Any bets on what will happen? So you hit the button, it does have a good check here to make sure that you didn't accidentally click it. So, but okay, we click OK. Uh-oh. So it looks for a file named exactly this way. Excuse me. So that's a problem. What are we going to do about that? Well, I'm going to come back over to my, nope, wrong window, sorry. Come back over here. Okay, now if I do POMS proxy info. So in this case, right, as I mentioned, I had done this before. So I still have 53 hours left on my proxy. So I think the easiest way to do this is do an SCP of this file, right, on the DUNE GPVM machine once you've made it. And the way you can make this, actually, yeah, why don't I just
Can you
make it so
explain the error? If you can also copy the error on the chat, I will just put it on the live docs.
well, it's just complaining that you don't have a valid proxy you can use to authenticate as you.
Okay.
But you have to upload it first,
Okay, thanks.
right? But you only have to do this once every several days. You said in the chat.
And the upload is what you will do now?
Yes.
Okay,
I will
great.
actually just destroy and make the proxy from scratch so you can see the whole process. I think that's easier. Okay, so I'm gonna kill my proxy. So, okay, now if I do this, so I've got nothing, but I've got a Kerberos ticket. So I do the usual KX509. Now by default, see, I get a proxy that's valid for 168 hours. So now I do VOMS, proxy init, no region, VOMS. Let's get that out of the way. DUNE role equals analysis. Valid for 120 hours, which I believe is the max. Okay, now if I do VOMS proxy info all. Okay, there we go. Good. All right, now let's come back to this other window. I'm gonna exit here, log out here, so we're back to my. Okay, so now I'm gonna do SCP. DUNE GPVM 15 now.gov. And I need this. Then I'm going to copy it locally, and then I'm going to name it like this. Of course, you would replace K-Herner with your own username. Okay, now what I can do is I go back here, back to the user data uploaded file section. Choose the file I want to upload. And there it is. Okay, now I've got a proxy. Now I can go back to my campaign stage. And I can try to submit. Why is this not clicking for me here? Okay. Worked 2 minutes ago. Was being slow the other day too, or actually even earlier this morning.
What's the type of delay that, if, for example, it takes 30 seconds, and so this is okay, and what's the type of delay?
Oh, this shouldn't, the delay for what?
Well, for example, right now it took around 1 minute to load. Is this okay, or should we worry? When should we worry, basically?
That is unusual, but it usually does end up loading. It can also be if you're, if for some reason your single sign-on session expires, then it has to re-authenticate. That's usually what happens, which is very odd, but it does occasionally.
Okay.
Okay. So why the launch button doesn't work, I have no idea. Because my browser's messed up. Try a different browser. Yeah, normally this is just smooth as glass. But
It's the observer effect. As soon as you know you're observed, by 37.
yes, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to put my username in. There we go. I don't actually care. I just want to launch the job. No. No, 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 nope.
Could you explain what is supposed to be in normal times, or what, for example, the batch job efficiencies? What are these
It
numbers?
should be just immediate. I mean, we hit the launch button like 2 minutes ago, right? Well, 5 minutes ago now, and it was fine. So, but I'm not sure what you mean by efficiency there when you're asking.
The CPU efficiency and memory efficiencies with these numbers on the right.
The CPU efficiency is just how much CPU time your jobs use divided by the actual wall time, the actual time that they take. Higher is better. Memory efficiency is just comparing the maximum memory usage of your job to your request. So if that number is low, that means you should request less memory. Man, I really don't get this. I mean, it was just fine. So, tell you what I will do. Just in case it's my browser being an idiot, which is possible. Just close the whole thing. Aha. So this, I think, means that, yeah, I think the authentication stuff on the back end is being weird. That would be my guess.
What I suggest is that once we debug this, we will release another video of a smooth run on this POMS. So then this will be put in the website as perhaps even shorter videos where you.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So then on the record on the website, people who wants to come back to this, this will be, we can even incorporate more questions in the meantime and give all of the documents, and then there will be a tutorial provided there with a smooth run on this. Actually, I have a question on the browsers that you would advise for POMS. You're using Chrome. I would bet that Firefox is pretty the superstar browser.
Shouldn't matter.
Is Safari also okay, and that you would recommend?
It should work with any.
Okay, great.
It really should. Okay, at least the page came back now. Okay, so let me then, yeah, I don't know why the launch button's stuck, but okay, let me switch gears a little bit then, and let's talk about the companion campaign here, which is the one where instead of passing that hard-coded XRD path for the analysis file, let's do this with SAM. Okay, so what's different here, I've got a different config file, as you see. I've specified a data set, which I've made this little guy here. I'm setting a higher memory value than the default because I think I tested this, it was using, I don't think quite 4,000, but it was well over the 1,800 I initially put. I'm also setting in the job setup section, I set IFDHR to true, as you see here. And that's about it. Now, okay, so this is going to let me launch apparently. Yes. Okay. So what happens here, right, is that it uses this user proxy, right, that we just uploaded. And then it's going to the POMS GPVM machine. And then it is exporting various environment variables here with related to what the campaign stage name is, the ID is, the submission ID. Okay, so here's the command that actually runs. It's this. Okay. So I do fife launch -c is the config file, and then, so use this config file, but with these -o's, override the following parameters. Also very useful when you're working with SAM datasets in POMS. In the submit section, you can pass this n files per job argument. So imagine you had a large data set and you initially might think, okay, well, I've got 10,000 files. I'll just submit 10,000 jobs. Easy, right, fine. But if your workflow only takes a couple of minutes to process one file, you end up with these extremely inefficient jobs because they come in, they unpack, if you're copying a tarball, for example, they unpack all that, they do all their setup. There's always some overhead with starting the job, right? And then you run for 45 seconds. And then you end up with this really small output file. And small files are not ideal for Dcache anyways, right? So you end up with so you have 10,000 tiny files. And a bunch of these extremely low efficiency jobs. But if you just could process multiple files in a job, say 50 or 100 or something, your job, yeah, will take a couple of hours, but you're putting a lot less load on Dcache, right? Because you're not trying to do 10,000 simultaneous connections, but 100. You're copying back bigger files, which is better for Tcache, and you're going to have a much higher efficiency. So using this n files per job is, if you know roughly how big you want your output files to be, you just set this submit. POMS will look at the SAM data set, figure out how many files are in it, and automatically figure out the right number of jobs for you, such that the average number of files per job is whatever you put here. Now, of course, I put 1 here because this is just an example. I can show you a production case where we don't do that. Okay, so here's our data set. We're putting in higher memory, as we talked about. So anyway, so you're going to log in, it sets up all the CPS stuff, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so after parsing the config file and substituting in your overrides, what actually pops out of this is then this job submit. So you'll recognize a lot of the stuff, right, that we ran yesterday. You'll see this append condor requirements, long string, all that stuff, right? Here's the usual memory and runtime. Here's the other thing we didn't talk about, and remind me to, is the auto release stuff. And then here's the tar file name, and then the fife wrap, and then it passes in a bunch of, this can get very long and ugly, I admit, but it does work, trust me. So it's basically telling it, okay, here's your prescripts, postscripts, here's what you want to do in the executable, blah, 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 blah. And, oh, I'm getting a warning because I put memory 4000 instead of 4000 megabytes. Default unit is megabytes, I'm okay. Okay, and it submitted my job, there we go. So here's my job ID number. And because I was submitting with a SAM data set, it automatically made a DAG for me, right? So there's my job ID. So it worked. Cool. Okay. So we can go back here.
And it would be really great if you can wrap in a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
so that people are having a break. At least, I mean, it's okay. The break is 30 minutes, so.
And then I can go over here to campaign stage stats like we did before. And I see, okay, I've got an job. And that'll probably change in a few minutes. You can see my previous failure because I went over the memory there. And there we have it. So there's a submission, and if I've got just a couple of more minutes, then yes, let me mention the auto release stuff. So I've got that in the config file, and we encourage everybody to put that in. I have this in both the with and without SAM one, I think. Okay, so we go down here to lines 2, 3, and 4. I think we mentioned this yesterday, right? That you can have the system automatically release your held jobs when they go over their memory request or their runtime request with a higher value. Basically, all you have to do is set these 3 parameters. And you do this with either the -L or the -- lines, just like you do with the singularity image. Okay, so you just have to tell it that yes, you want to use auto release. Okay, this is not default, by the way, so you do have to opt into it. Yeah. Then you just say there's the grace memory and the grace lifetime. These have to be specified for right now in megabytes and seconds, respectively. These amounts are the amounts to add to the original. So it's not the new value, but the amount you want to add. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, if I go over my memory, I want to add an additional 2000 megabytes to whatever I initially requested. And I want to add an additional 24 hours runtime. Now, of course, the jobs will start over from the beginning, as they do when they go held. But this is a really nice tool because, as we mentioned yesterday, right, it's actually better if you set your initial request to cover kind of 90 to 95% of your jobs. And then the auto release can be used to pick up the rest. So why don't we ask for questions now? And hopefully this page will have come back by the end of the break.
And again, I think we will post perhaps not this recording, but another video, very short, where the whole workflow is run again and it's smooth, and then people will learn from it. I do not see any question on the Code-makover live docs, but they may come later. And I'm sure that people are eager to see. So we will notify people once the video is ready, so that there will be an asynchronous tutorial on POMS, and then the full workflow will work, and that would be a very nice demo for people. Sure. Great. Thank you so much, Ken. That was very nice. And stay tuned for the video. And right now, I invite everyone to take a break. I think a well-deserved one, a lot of material to digest.